Of all the U.S. aircraft gun sights of World War II, the Mark 8 gun sight stands at the top in terms of number produced and the variety of aircraft used on. And considering that most Wildcat, Hellcat, Corsair, and even Army P 47 Thunderbolt aerial victories were racked up with this type of sight, it is most likely the most successful U.S. gun sight of the war. It was nowhere near the most advanced, but its simplicity and ruggedness made it a solid all around sight. Like many of the US gun sights of the war, the design was not original to the Americans, but was derived from a British design. The RAF Mark II, as used on Spitfires and Hurricanes in the Battle of Britain, featured a large objective lens and a generously sized oval reflector glass. The US Navy adopted and simplified the design, removing the stadiometric ranging knobs used to specify wingspan base and range in favor of a more elaborate reticle to be used in deflection estimation. The Mark 8 family of sights came in many different modifications or mods. These mods may indicate a major functional difference, an experimental design, or just a manufacturer's differing design on the internal components. While records of which sight mods were used on which aircraft don't exist, it would seem the most commonly used sights were the Mark 8 Mod 5, Mod 6, and Mod 8. The most recognizable visual difference between the various Mark 8 sights is the sight head, the standard reflector, the headless, or an adjustable sight head. With the standard Mark 8 sight head, the reticle image is projected on a reflector glass held at a 45-degree angle over the objective lens, and the pilot looks through the glass to see the reticle image projected out at infinity. To improve reticle visibility in bright conditions, early Mark 8 sights included a sun filter, which could be flipped aside as needed. However, due to improvements in the brightness of the lamp, the sun filter was no longer needed, and by November of 1944 was directed to be removed. Because of this, surviving sights with sun filters are uncommon today. On later production versions of most fighters, the standard front windshield was replaced with bullet-resistant glass, which was optically corrected. This allowed the reticle image to be projected directly on the windshield itself, making the reflector and its sight head no longer required. This change simplified production and maintenance, and by the end of the war, nearly all Hellcats and Corsairs would use this type of sight. To accurately use a gun sight for dropping bombs or firing rockets, additional deflection needs to be made, and the adjustable reflector head Mark II does this by allowing the angle of the reflector glass to be adjusted relative to the objective lens. This Mark II Mod 1 head could be used on any Mark 8 sight regardless of mod, and saw use on the Avenger. The similar Mark I Mod 1 without the crash pad buffer was used on the Mark 30 torpedo director. In the final months of the war, the Mark II sight head was replaced by the Mark IV Mod 0 adjustable reflector sight head, which utilized a rectangular reflector and was improved to eliminate reticle blurring caused by vibration. The Mark IV Mod 0 head would see service in Avengers, as well as the Lockheed Neptune and Grumman Guardian. Later Neptunes would mount the Mark 8 sight above the pilot on the cockpit ceiling, requiring an inverted version of this sight head known as the Mark 7 Mod 0. Varying the angle of the reflector with the sight head is one way of changing the sight deflection, but it can also be done by changing the angle on the reticle itself. This method was used on the Mark 8 Mod 10, which used a standard fixed reflector, and the Mark 8 Mod 12, which projected onto the front windshield. A variety of reticle designs was used on the Mark 8 family of sights. Let's look at several of them. The Mark 8 sights installed on the aircraft exported to the British Commonwealth used a reticle based on the design of the British Mark II sight, with a 58.9 mil diameter ring with crosshairs. The early Mark 8 reticle design expanded on the British design and included 100 and 200 mil rings in addition to the crosshairs. The next development added radial lines to the bottom of the reticle to help in estimating deflection while turning and for use in bombing. The reticle plates used in the original Mark 8 and Mod 1 variants had a flat etched plate that created optical aberrations at the edges. This was corrected by using a curved reticle plate on the Mod 2 and all subsequent mods. After this point, the Mod 1 and older sights were considered obsolete and removed from service. The ultimate development of the Mark 8 reticle added a graduated rocket ladder to the vertical axis of the crosshairs to be used in bombing and rocket attacks. A unique version of this later reticle with only a partial rocket ladder can be seen on the Mark 8 Mod 10. As the U.S. Army Air Force used the Mark 8 sight on many P-47 Thunderbolts, a standard AAF ring and bead style reticle was used on their Mark 8 sights, as reflected by this N9 reticle. Mark 8 sights were manufactured by several different companies, including Bell and Howell, American cystoscope makers, Morgan Optical, Spencer Lens Company, and perhaps others, as some sites are not labeled with their maker's name. All Mark 8 sites carry a unique serial number, although it is not known if all serial numbers allocated were actually produced. The latest serial number found is 91,653 on this Mod 6 site. This one, serial number 200, is one of the earliest and carries the Roman numeral 8 instead of the Arabic 8 seen on later models, such as this Mod 1, which carries serial number 1459, also a very early number. The Mark 8 sight was illuminated with a GE Mazda 890 bulb held in a plastic lamp holder. Like most gunsight bulbs, the 890 is a two-filament bulb for redundancy, meaning that it is really two bulbs in one. If a filament burns out in flight, the pilot can simply switch to the other filament with just a switch in the cockpit, versus having to replace a light bulb mid-flight. The 890 bulb was a 21 candle power bulb, nominally 24 volts, but compatible with the aircraft's 28-volt electrical system. It was the brightness of this bulb that made the sun filter obsolete. Starting in July of 1944, new lamp holders had an adjustable clip that could be bent to allow better retention. These are identifiable by rectangular push buttons instead of the round ones found on earlier lamp holders. One important factor for a pilot to consider when setting up a turning deflection shot is whether the aircraft is in a coordinated turn or is skidding. While normally a pilot would look for a skid in the liquid level and his turn and bank indicator on the instrument panel, this would mean taking his eyes off of the target. The solution was a liquid level mounted on the gun sight itself. Early levels were very small, but late versions were enlarged, and the latest versions came in high visibility yellow. Mark 8s were mounted above the instrument panel with a variety of mounts. Like many other types of gun sights, there are standardized mounts supplied with the gun sight and manufacturer-specific mounts supplied with the aircraft. Here's a standardized mount, a variation with an adjusting mechanism, and an aircraft-specific mount. The highly standardized design of the Mark 8 opened it up to a great deal of field and depot modifications, and surviving sites today reflect a great variety in configuration. For example, this very early Mark 8 pre-mod carries the mid-era reticle, but would have undoubtedly been delivered with the early reticle design as shown on this Mod 1. This Mod 4 sight had its standard head cut down in the field for use with the new bulletproof windshield. And this Mod 8 sight had its fixed reflector head replaced with a Mod 6 head, also for use with the new windshields. In September of 1944, when the rocket ladder reticle was introduced, a new small red reticle was also introduced for use on night fighters. In July of 1945, an additional reticle was introduced, a white dawn and dusk ground attack design. It is unknown whether either of these two new reticles were ever actually installed and used in Mark 8 sites. However, both of these new reticles were utilized in the Mark 20 site, which saw extensive use in the Korean War in Sky Raiders and A-26 Invaders. The Mark 20 carried three reticles that the pilot could select with the turn of a knob, including the standard Mark 8 reticle in yellow, the white dawn and dusk ground attack reticle, and the red night fighter reticle. The ultimate development of the Mark 8 sight post-war was the Mark 1 system, which, like the Mark 8 mods 10 and 12, allowed adjustments of the elevation internally, but unlike those earlier systems, used a separate control box to input the elevation. Some of the resources referenced in this video can be seen here. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see a gallery of all of my gun sights of this type, please stick around, and feel free to contact me with questions.